All right, welcome to Halitics. One more time, I'm Hal Ginsberg. Yes, click on the icon in the bottom right of your screen, the square, blue and white, Halitics. If you're not yet a subscriber, I would greatly appreciate that. Also, please click like if you like what I'm doing. And either way, like it, hate it, comment, let me know your thoughts. We'll get to your comments from the week later in today's stream. Yes, it's Groundhog Day. I started and then I stopped and I restarted. I had a coughing jag and I just decided to delete that because the coughing is awful and it was easier for me. We're only about 10 minutes into the stream to just restart. I've got my lozenges out. Hopefully that will prevent me from being disabled from continuing the program. I do want to do it today. I really hate missing a day. Missing a couple of days is not what I want to do here. I want to talk to you. So starting with the impending snowstorm in New York City, maybe tomorrow. There hasn't been snow there for 700 plus days. And Fox 5 New York covering it. But what they're not covering, what they're not telling you is why there's been so little snow. And we know why there is. We know, if you've been paying any attention, it's because of the climate holocaust. It's because we are burning fossil fuels at an unprecedented rate. Every year, more fossil fuels, more greenhouse gas emissions are pumped into the atmosphere. And this leads to increasing temperatures on Earth. Hotter temperatures, less snow. It's really simple. That's what's going on. And the media tells you when there's snow, tells you when there isn't snow. What they don't tell you is why. Why aren't they telling you that? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, right? They're bought and paid for by the Petroleum Institute, by other fossil fuel producers. And frankly, when you hear over and over and over about how bad the environment is as a direct result of human consumption, guess what? You'll probably consume less. It's not just consuming less oil and gas, coal, but less of everything. And the media is bought and paid for by its advertisers, people who want you to purchase their products, to consume their products, to eat the food, the snacks, the chips, to buy the cars that they advertise, they sponsor. If you consume less, they make less money. They don't want you to hear about the not just depressing, world-destroying impact of your consumption patterns. So that's why you just don't. That's just why you don't. Now, you don't read about it. You don't hear about it. You don't see it on TV, on the radio. I say read, yes, because you often are reading when you're watching TV, the chyrons, the scrolls, etc. So what exactly are we seeing in New York City? Well, 700 days nearly without an inch of snow. But this weekend's forecast shows that change could be coming. All right. So they're telling you there could be snow, but they don't tell you why there hasn't been any snow. And I don't want to just bash all media, because certainly the Washington Post, New York Times, newspapers do tell you, and magazines do tell you, but not broadcast media. When I was in Monterey doing radio, the only outlet that told you about the climate holocaust was KRXA 540, the radio station that I owned and operated. That was it. And why is that? Because the other stations didn't want to irritate, annoy, aggravate their sponsors, their advertisers. And some, they're also owned in many cases, Infinity Broadcasting, whatever, now iHeartMedia. The boards are interlocking. The same people who sit on the board of iHeartMedia sit on the board of ExxonMobil. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap. So all of this goes together. It's a conspiracy, basically, of the elites not to tell you the information you need to make the best decisions we can make together for the future of our country and for our world. It's incredibly dispiriting. I want to play the video. There's a little bit of personal backstory to this video, so we'll get to it right now. This is Fox 5 New York, and I don't want to spend too much time. So much of what we learn you can glean right from your newspapers, from watching live streams like this. But it's really important to know how much the news is curated, how often it's curated to prevent you from hearing about, reading about, seeing what really, really matters. Here's Fox 5 covering the possible snowstorm this weekend, and this is from Wednesday in New York City. So let's see if we can get this for you. Here we go. And as I mentioned, there's a little personal backstory, so we'll get to that in a moment as well.
In just a few days, New York's snowless streak could come to an end. It's been almost 2 years since there's been more than an inch of snow in Central Park.
Pretty wild. The winter storm expected to hit the tri-state area. Linda Schmidt talked to New Yorkers to find out if they're excited or over it.
Well, the hill here in Central Park has been so lonely over the past 2 years, but that could all change.
So let me just stop it there. No word why there's been no snow. She laments it, Linda Schmidt does, in her down coat there, but she doesn't say why. The hosts tell you there hasn't been snow, but they don't mention the cause. So again, the information that's crucial is omitted from this broadcast. And it's not just a weather report. You say, well, if it's a weather report, we don't need all the backstory, why, climate is changing. We just need to know if it's going to rain this weekend. But this is not a weather report. This is a story about what the city has been like without snow and how people are excited that there may be snow coming.
This weekend, it might just end up getting some action. Of course, kids love playing in the park, but nothing compares to snow.
I'm very excited. I love the snow. I love the snow because I like to go sledding with my friends. We have that thing where two people can ride on it at the same time.
What do you like best about the snow?
That they can go skiing and snowboarding.
So you hear right there, I mean, there's a real loss. Now, I don't want to analogize the fewer opportunities to ski. These kids seem, just from first glance, relatively privileged, advantaged. I don't want to say their loss of being able to sled in Central Park is the same as what a climate refugee in Bangladesh is going through. Obviously, it's not the same. But we're all victims of this rapacious, consumption-oriented society. And I think it would behoove us to know from Fox 5, and this is not Fox News, this isn't like the right wing. I mean, I know they have the same ownership, but this is all media that's doing this. They just simply will not discuss the climate holocaust.
Kids are ready for some snow. This was Central Park about 3 years ago. The kids, the small ones and the big ones, have missed it.
They've been very upset. There's no school to be missed. There's no, fun sledding to be had.
They've been quite frustrated about it. They're just dying to get out and do some sledding in the snow.
I really like having snowball fights with my little sister.
So I go to work, right? Get a day off from work and go play.
Right, so all the benefits we've gotten, every now and then it's like a nice little break. You got a snowstorm. It doesn't happen anymore. Much, much more rarely. There's a dog frolicking. My dog Ginger loved the snow. It's like a change. It's something different. You're bored. It's the same outdoors every day. You look outside. You see grass. You see trees. Oh, wow, it's cool. It's snow. It's different. We don't have that anymore.
And 5-year-old Pippa is super excited about playing in the snow.
Oh, she'd love it. She'd go frolicking.
Wouldn't it be great if we could all be like Pippa?
So I want to stop it there. So you see that big white dog just sort of ambling across the screen, video bombing. That's how this video got to my attention. That dog is actually a family dog. She's my sister's dog. And her aunt, my sister's sister, actually saw the video, saw the news report and let us know about it. So kind of cool. That's the familial connection. Wanted to share that. But the point really here is that we're all losers because of the climate holocaust. And our corporate media, I mean, and some are much bigger losers than others. Obviously, if your home is flooded, if you lose the ability to sustain yourself, which so many are, you live in an area where it's so hot that it's uninhabitable, which many people are now. Your home is underwater half the time. That's really serious. But even just the, day-to-day loss of no snow, no winter, it's tragic. And your media isn't telling you. Your TV isn't telling you. I saw this, and I posted this on my Facebook page. Let me see if I can get this up here too. And I do want to give a hat tip to my great friend Gigi for sharing this, and that's how I came about to learn of it. But Dr. Gardner there, and by the way, he spells dumbfounded. I kind of made a little crack about how he spells dumbfounded incorrectly, and then I respelled it for him with a 3 Ds, so I spelled it DUMBFOUNDED. But dumbfounded, the way he spells it, is okay. You can spell it without a B, but I reject. I mean, I understand, yes, it's considered an alternative, an acceptable alternative, but what dumbfounded ultimately means is you're struck dumb. You don't even know what to say. So what Dr. Gardner's point here is that he is so, he's proud, I guess, in sort of a ironic way, that scientists have been able to document and prove with beyond any doubt that human activities are unraveling life on Earth. We're in the 6th grade extinction. The food webs are being just rent. Loss of, the quality of life for so many is declining. Organisms are struggling. And it goes from single-celled all the way up to the most complex. So he's saying, I'm proud that we're at least able to document it. But I'm utterly dumbfounded by how little anyone seems to care. So, first of all, I think you should spell it with a B, because dumb with a B means you can't speak. And he's sort of saying, I can't. I'm rendered speechless by this, although he's obviously not rendered speechless because he just posted this meme. But I think you should use the B. So I was like, really? Come on, man. At least spell it correctly. This has sort of been my take too. I've been doing this for years, and I remember talking to a guy out in Monterey, Carmel, who was in denial. And at first he had been like, this is awful what we're doing. This is terrible. And then he started saying, no, it's not even happening. And I was like, how can you even think it's, and it is kind of dumbfounding to me, but I think people just compartmentalize it. It's so awful. You don't want to think about how badly we are destroying our mother, how we're absolutely burning her up in our lifetimes, in the lifetimes of our children. It's very painful. You don't want to think about it. You shut your eyes to it. And you say, well, there's nothing I can do, right? There's nothing I can do. There's things you can do. You can vote for alternatives to the duopoly, for one thing, the duo party. That's one thing you can do. You can walk. I mean, we can take little baby steps for ourselves. It won't make a real difference. That won't be meaningful. But re-electing better people could make a difference. Electing Democrats has not done so. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. And the argument, well, we can't let the perfect, meaning high and rising carbon taxes, fossil fuel taxes, and redistributing the wealth down so that everyone has enough. That's the kind of perfect. It's not perfect, but it's much better than what we have now. So many of you would say, some of you would say, we can't let that perfect be the enemy of the good, which is at least electing Democrats who know this is a real problem. Don't deny it. Yet, again, under Barack Obama, Democratic president, our production of fossil fuels, of oil and gas, maybe not coal, oil and gas, reached record highs. President Trump, under his administration, Republican, again, our nation surpassed Obama's oil and gas production. And now, under Joe Biden, Democrat, we have surpassed the oil and gas production totals under the Trump administration. So it doesn't really matter if you elect a Republican or a Democrat. We get to the same place, which is destroying our mother, burning our mother up, destroying our planet. We have to do something different. And Fox News, one of the reasons I think people Fox 5 in New York and all the TV stations, I think one of the reasons people seem not to care is because our media isn't doing its job, making sure we understand the seriousness, the specific implications of the climate holocaust and how it's negatively impacting on our lives. So a big reason people seem not to care is because it's not being brought home to them by the media just how serious the problem is. Another reason people seem not to care, Dr. Gardner, is because a quarter of the people in the state of New York are food insecure. They may care, but they care more about where their next meal is coming from. They may care, but they're more focused right now on making sure they have a roof over their head. So I'm always reminded by the words of Winnie Mima, who was head of World Hunger Organization, when she said, you cannot extricate the climate crisis from inequality. They are tied together. As long as we have massive wealth and income inequality, we cannot tackle the climate crisis because tackling it will fall hardest on poor, struggling, working people. With massive wealth and income and power inequality, the rich and powerful, which is always the same synonym, will use that influence that they have, their power, to make sure that they don't suffer and that others who have less do. And because of that, it's going to be impossible to summon a political will that's necessary to tackle this this life-threatening issue. We have to address inequality just as much as we have to address the climate holocaust. All right, if you want to join me, 240-242-5646. I just looked at my screen to make sure I had the right phone number there. I wanted to revisit stories today. It is the free-for-all, so I'll kind of revisit if I don't hear from you. I've been focusing a lot on what's happening at Harvard, maybe for some of you too much, but it is the ultimate elite institution. It's the ultimate university that creates Supreme Court justices, that spits out Supreme Court justices, presidents. I think more presidents by far went to Harvard than any other institution as recently, right, as President Obama went to Harvard Law School. And we've seen, JFK was a Harvard man. And you can just go down the list. For good or ill, Harvard has a tremendous influence, more so than any other institution, academic institution on our nation. And recently, of course, we know that the president was forced to step down, pushed out, because of documented instances in the dozens of her failing to properly attribute sources in her relatively thin publication record. And this has been, and I think I talked about this, Bret Stephens, a columnist at the New York Times, who went to Harvard, I thought did an outstanding job saying that what this is about now is what the symbol of Dr. Claudine Gay really means. If you view Dr. Claudine Gay as a symbol of a better, more inclusive Harvard that's diverse and equitable and inclusive, then you're apoplectic that this wonderful symbol has been taken down. If you view her instead as a symbol of, wokeism run amok, of promoting people who are without merit or don't deserve, maybe not without merit, but less merit than many others, solely because of their gender, solely because of their race, then you're pleased. And if you view her as somebody who is trying to remake the institution in a way that you don't like, again, you're going to be pleased. So it's not about the doctor herself. It's not about whether she was qualified, whether she was doing a good job, whether she deserved in the first place to get the position. It's about something very, very different. And that's what you see in this column by Dr. Cottom, Tressie McMillan Cottom, who is a professor, I believe, in the North Carolina University system. And Dr. Cottom is, I guess, liked what Dr. Gay symbolized. And she's very upset. She's critical of the decision that Harvard made. This is in yesterday's New York Times, maybe in today's actually, but it came out yesterday in the online edition. So she, again, it's all about the symbol for Dr. Cottom. And rather than start out by talking about how she viewed Dr. Gay, she points the finger at the conservatives who are taking their victory lap for taking down Claudine Gay. And she says, hey, they're saying this is a win for the social justice model, or it's a loss, and we're so glad we're back to the meritocracy. The social justice model, we have to have the presidency. We need a black woman. We've never had one at Harvard. We need a black woman. And that this is clearly a terrible precedent that they set, where they completely, ignore the quality of her scholarship, how much she, how much she has actually contributed. Conservatives are saying that, and that's just false. They're pleased. I know they feel like they have a win. And she said, and she can understand why some would agree with that, because status without concern for merit breeds resentment. Well, this is 100% true. There is no question. Status granted without concern for merit breeds resentment. In fact, I would go so far as to say status breeds resentment, period. People don't, even if you deserve to get where you are in some holistic sense, you worked really hard, you did really good work, you produced, there's still going to be resentment. People are still going to say they didn't deserve it. They didn't pay their dues. Their father got them that spot. I mean, whatever. There's always going to be that, which is one of the reasons, by the way, that I am such a big believer in equality. Why I believe so much that what we really need to do more than anything else, and these problems that we're seeing here would largely go away. The resentment, if we reduced dramatically wealth and income inequality. One of the big reasons, not the only reason, but one of the big reasons that there's so much resentment is because if you're the president of Harvard, you get paid $900,000 a year. And I know that's like a spit for some people. They're like, that's not even that much money. Look at they're not making $1 million. She's never going to be a billionaire. Think about it. $900,000 is an enormous amount of money. And you have tremendous wealth. You have tremendous ability to make more money, to leverage that into many millions of dollars. So this is a great coup to be the president of Harvard, and it means that you will live much, much, much better than just about anybody else. If we said, you can live a little better, you can't live that much better, nobody's going to live that much better than everyone's going to have enough, no one has too much, then these fights over who should get to be president, over what. They'll still be there. It's still good to be the president. It wouldn't be so vitriolic. It wouldn't be so tinged with accusations of racism and affirmative action if we simply made a decision as a society that those at the top, those at the bottom, and those in the middle are all going to live relatively equally in terms of their resource, in terms of the resources that they can command. So much of this fighting would be over. That's what we need to do. Because Harvard should be an elite institution. It should promote to the presidency the most qualified people who have demonstrated it by their record of achievement. But when becoming president of Harvard has such an outsized influence, both on the quality of the person's life who's made Harvard president, but also on the people in the institution. Are we going to have more black professors? Are we going to have more professors who come from prep schools, right? Because clearly Dr. Gay, despite having attended Phillips Exeter, which is an elite prep school, I think was trying, and I respect this, to get professors who hadn't and students who hadn't necessarily attended those elite prep schools. But this is, who's going to get those plums? Who's going to get the goodies and get to live so much better than everyone else? That's the question that is asked when there's this fight over who gets to lead Harvard. But if we said, again, you can be the president of Harvard. You can be the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. You can be the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. And you'll live a little better than everyone else, but you won't live that much better than anybody else. If we did that, we would be able to push more towards a true meritocracy, where, to the extent that such a thing can exist, where you're judged based on on your output, on what you've actually produced, instead of just being a symbol. Now, Dr. Cottom doesn't apparently agree with me, because she claims, and this is important for her argument, because she wants, I guess, a black woman to be president of Harvard. She's going to defend Dr. Gay because she's a black woman. And since Dr. Gay's record is not good, it's not impressive. She didn't publish a lot. She didn't make some major breakthrough in an important area of sociology. She just simply said, we need more people of color, we need more women in places of power. And if we do that, things will get better. We know that things don't necessarily get better when you have a new boss. They're often the same as the old boss, regardless of the color of their skin or whether they stand or sit when they urinate. It doesn't often mean there's going to be a real difference. So Dr. Cottom, recognizing that if you argue whether Dr. Gay deserved her appointment, you're going to lose that argument. She did plagiarize. She does have a thin academic record. There were better qualified candidates if you consider those traditional, important qualifications. So what does she say? So you can't even define merit. Forget it. Throw it out. There's no such thing. It cannot be proved or disproved. It can only be argued. This is what happens. We lose sight of the fact that, of course, we can judge people with some degree of accuracy for positions. There is such a thing as merit. Some academic papers are better than others. Some researchers are better at researching than others. Merit can be defined. It's not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. But if you view Dr. Gay as a symbol of what education should be, a black woman president of Harvard. And if that symbol, if you look at it even cursorily, doesn't measure up under any traditional measure of merit, then you just have to throw merit out the window. Well, that's crazy. Obviously, merit can be defined. How many papers have you written? How many professors cite those papers? Are they influential in the field? Has the field changed? Your field of study, has it changed? Are textbooks including your theories as though they're proven? Of course, is what you've done as a professor or what you've written as a student. Is that being embraced throughout the field? Of course you can judge research with some degree of objectivity, with a significant degree. To claim otherwise is absurd. And Professor Cottom is, I'm sure in her own work, she would say, oh, of course, I deserved it. Yes, I should be a New York Times opinion columnist. I did merit that. Yes, my book, Thick and Other Essays, was published because it's a good book. Well, I thought you just said merit can't be defined, one or the other. But we're in that place because the position is so incredibly important in terms of one's future life quality. And that's what we have to change. We have to say merit is important when it comes to academia. Merit is important when it comes to the business world. But merit isn't going to determine if you have enough to eat. Merit isn't going to determine whether you have 5 houses, because no one gets 5 houses. That's the solution. And that's why I do this live stream. All right, more stories. I talked about the Hamas attacks on October 7th and the claim of sexual assault, widespread sexual violence. And I've been skeptical. I'm not quite as skeptical, perhaps, as someone like a Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate from The Gray Zone, if you ever watched that, where they seem to reject all allegations of Hamas rapes. I do, and I played for you a video where they took Shani Lauk's body anyway. I'm not sure she may have been dead at the point, and she was wearing a very skimpy dress, and it did look like there was some sexual stuff going on with her, that they, were forcing something untoward, ugly, whatever you want to call it, beyond just having murdered her, killed her. The dress was what she had been wearing. So it's not like they disrobed her, but it looked off for sure. I'm trying to be as fair as I can. So I'm not going to say there was no sexual assault or that all the claims are completely unfounded. But the story that Israel is telling is not really adding up too well either. And that's why I continue, or am even perhaps more skeptical. So this is from Haaretz this year. Israeli police asked victims and witnesses to testify about Hamas sexual violence. This is what they say. Most of the victims of Hamas sexual violence on October 7 were killed, taken hostage, or are in a state of psychological distress and unable to testify. Israel's police investigators are now appealing to the public to encourage the victims to contact them and give them evidence. So the bottom line is they don't have the evidence. I mean, they're framing it, Haaretz, and I wanted to give you how Haaretz framed this, unlike how the Gray Zone and Blumenthal and Mate did, because they're just saying, oh, they don't have the evidence and they're just desperate to find it. That's not how Haaretz is framing it. They're saying, well, the victims are either dead or they're in psychological shock. Obviously, that's a kind of BS, because there would be other witnesses. There would be people who saw it, not just the victims themselves. There are, at least in the New York Times article, there's descriptions. But what this really goes to is what I said, was it yesterday? I think maybe it was Wednesday. This is why you take photographs. This is why you have forensic evidence. This is why when there's a crime scene, the police mark it off with yellow tape and they go and they take all the photos they can possibly take and they document everything and they take samples and they take skin samples and they take semen samples and they take blood samples and swabs. That's why when there's a crime scene, you gather all the evidence. You don't just bury the bodies in 24 hours. And that's why I'm skeptical, so skeptical of these claims of widespread sexual violence. Because if it happened, and if it was clear to the Israeli police, then they would have documented it at the time. And they didn't. And we know that at least one victim, the poster victim in the New York Times story, her sister now says, no, we don't know that she was raped. The New York Times says she was raped, but we don't know that. We haven't gotten the evidence that confirms that. So the story by Israel of widespread sexual assaults, widespread sexual violence on October 7th simply has not been corroborated in any persuasive way. Now, it's important, though, that we understand, even if it were corroborated, it still wouldn't make it okay what Israel's doing. It still wouldn't justify killing 22,000 plus people. They're not connected. But people would be like, well, I can understand why they're so angry. It's not true. They're just coming up with anything to distract you from their orgy of violence in Gaza. Okay, let's get to comments real quick, and then we'll call it a week. So I mentioned this from Emoji. Dang Hal, I wish you were the new Tom Hartman. This goes from comments by Arlen about how great Tom Hartman is, or how much he appreciates Tom Hartman. And, you know, I've always been very mixed on Hartman. I think he has done some good things, a lot I don't like. I think he does carry water for the elites, the Democratic elites. I don't like it. I always thought Ed was a better host. I could see that Ed wasn't perfect either. Ed Schultz, Big Ed, who's now dead, rest in peace. But you know, Hartman's good enough, I suppose. So I took this as a big compliment. I wish you had his audience, is what I meant. You have a good radio voice and a conveyable analysis. So I appreciate that very much, Emoji. Thank you for that comment. Less positive remarks. Here is from Shade. So Shade giving me some advice because I've been lamenting my small and not growing audience of subscribers. So he suggests, Shade, that I get Peter B. Collins on. So of course Peter B. and I were partners in the radio venture in Monterey. Peter B. was a host. Peter B. is a very well-known radio personality from the Bay Area, very progressive. And I really have to tell you, Shade, I never thought about co-hosting with Peter B. Collins. I have thought about like a regular kind of co-host. And the kind of co-host that I have been thinking about, to the extent I've thought about it, and I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, because I like doing the show on my own. I always like doing it myself. I like it being sort of my vision, my way. And I get that may limit me, which is unfortunate. But to the extent I've thought about having a co-host, it's been maybe someone more along the lines of Coach, who I thought we had a very good chemistry. We were funny together. I enjoyed working with him. I think for him, it was more of a mixed bag. I get that. But, you know, I'm not ruling out Peter B. Collins for sure. I don't think he would add that much, because our views, and not because I don't think he's talented. I think it's because our views are very similar. There wouldn't be a lot of disagreement. I think we'd be basically taking the same position on a lot of issues. So I'm not sure that would add much to have Peter be on. A Coach, you know, brings a different sensibility, he brings humor, he brings more of like an everyday, working average Joe kind of, and I mean that in a good way, not a bad way at all, sensibility. So I think he would bring a little difference. So that's why I'm not big a Peter B type. But I'll think about it. If you have a comment on that you want to share, please do. And if you want to call 240-242-5646. More comments here. So this is, this is from a individual who has a very, very different take on Israel-Palestine than I do. And I wanted to share this not because I'm putting this person down or I definitely disagree with them, but it's not like to embarrass, that's not the point of this. It's to say this is such a widespread view. And to me, and I understand why it's wide, and I don't mean it's necessarily widespread just with Israel, but again, and I use the word sensibility before again, it's kind of a sensibility or an ethos that is extremely common and I find incredibly dangerous. So we were going back and forth, and this person writes, I'm always going to be with Israel. And I circle that because I think that's what's most important, not, the kind of, I think, clearly false assertion, these casualties, and actually kind of almost, something is wrong with that. For the Palestinians happened because they were in the line of fire. No one in IDF went there to intentionally kill them. Well, they did. First of all, we know that there have been snipers who are intentionally killing people, including people who were in church, at the church, the Catholic Church in Gaza. So we know that there were intentional killings, for sure, of civilians by the IDF. But even the argument, well, they happened because they were in the line of fire. That's right. Israel had to know when it launched its invasion of Gaza and when it was bombing Gaza and sending missiles into Gaza, that lots of innocents would be in the line of fire. And that's why they shouldn't have done it, among many other reasons. And that the statement, I'm always going to be with Israel. Again, this is where I think, this tribalism, and we see it everywhere. Whether it's, I'm a Republican, I side with Trump. I'm a Democrat, Trump's evil. I can't embrace the climate crisis, the climate Holocaust. I can't accept the climate Holocaust is real because it would mean, and I don't think people do this consciously, but I see this in neoliberals, whatever, people who accept kind of the capitalist line. I can't accept the climate Holocaust is real because if I did, it would mean that the beliefs that I've had about the market and about big government are wrong. And yes, it does mean that. It does. There's no way to spin it. When we recognize that human activity by burning fossil fuels is causing us to burn up our mother, it means we have to take a very different, radically different view towards government. Government has to be much more involved in reining in corporations and individuals. It has to be. And it's certainly not only the climate crisis that proves that. I mean, slavery is a great example too. I talked about this before. That's why Nikki Haley couldn't say that slavery was the cause of the Civil War, because her entire political perspective is government bad. Government takes away freedom. It doesn't enhance freedom, except I guess when we're killing Palestinians, then it's enhancing freedom somehow because she supports that war, except when we're helping kill people in Ukraine, then which is a war she supports. But if you say, okay, yes, the Civil War was fought over slavery, then what you're having to acknowledge is that we need a government to protect people from being enslaved. That rich, powerful, influential people will, in the end, make slaves of others if they can do it. And only through government can we stop it. If you accept that position, you can't be a libertarian. You can't be a hard right, rock-ribbed Republican. Unless you are okay with slavery, which some people obviously are. As long as they're not the slaves. So you have to reject the climate Holocaust for the same reason. Because the only way we can stop the climate Holocaust is by tremendous action by government. Now, I don't even think it is. I mean, I would say the best way to do it is just to tax fossil fuels, make them much, much more expensive relative to everything else. But if you did that, you would still need the apparatus of government to do that. You would need the apparatus of government to have the power to tax. And you would also need the apparatus of government to redistribute the revenues. And that's something that so many on the right and libertarians are against. So yeah, if you accept the climate holocaust, you have to change your views on government. And if you accept that Israel is a genocidal state and on a rampage where it's targeting and killing Palestinians, you have to change your view on Israel. And that's very, very hard, or perhaps impossible for many to do. But I never got that. I mean, I understand that. I understand that's how people are. But I don't really understand why. I mean, because for me, I'm, if someone tries to change my mind, I'm going to push back. But if you can convince me that there's some other way to stop the climate catastrophe beyond raising the cost of fossil fuels to heretofore never seen levels, let me know. Let's talk about it. I'm about solutions. The problem we have is we're burning up our mother. The climate holocaust is causing the 6th great extinction. If you have a solution other than raising the cost of fossil fuels to astronomical levels, I'd love to know what it is. Final comment, let's go to Jeff, our friend Jeff here. So Jeff says, and this is in response to my discussion yesterday on hunger in New York and homelessness across the country that are at record levels. So I guess Jeff is, I don't know if you want to call this, he's always negative on any kind of government action because he also, doesn't believe in the government. So if you accept that we have to do something about the climate, or you accept we have to do something about people sleeping under bridges and hungry families, then you have to change your mind. You have to change your view. You have to say, you know what, I believe that government is the enemy and the biggest lie ever is that I'm from the government, I'm here to help. You have to kind of reject that worldview that you may have had. And it's hard for some people, it's hard to change their worldviews. Again, I don't ever get that. My goal is, first of all, we have to first and foremost make sure everyone has a home and everyone has food. I mean, that's like my priority. That's my assumption. How could you change me from having that assumption? I guess the only way is if you said, well, we can't afford it, which is Jeff's point. How much will it cost? You want to do all this? You want to spend all this money? How are we going to do it? Even if it were proven to be some astronomical level, I would still say, okay, well, we all still have to make sure we all have enough. I mean, if there isn't enough, then we have to figure out a way to have the burdens relatively fairly distributed. And we are getting to that point, by the way, where the Earth's past its carrying capacity, but we're not there yet. And in this country, we have enough. To the extent we're getting past our carrying capacity, that's why we raise the price of fossil fuels right now. That's why we push for negative population growth, so we don't have more mouths on the planet than we can feed. Jeff's view, I guess, is there's only so many goodies to go around, and I don't want my goodies to go to somebody who is hungry and without a home. So I decided, I looked this up because I thought, well, it's kind of a fair question, right? I mean, in the end, if I'm going to say we need to house everyone and we need to make sure everyone has enough to eat, well, that will cost something, I suppose. Maybe not that much, but it will cost something. So I decided to look it up. This is from the New York Times. A few years ago, Benjamin Applebaum, I believe, is the author. This is from their opinion page. And he really goes into this in detail. He talks about what the cost would be to guarantee everyone has enough. And to a degree, I guess that no one has too much. And I really, really, really appreciate that. So he starts with talking about Seattle, which, by the way, has a very serious homeless problem, of course, like all of our cities. And he says, for Seattle alone, for King County, and by the way, he makes the point, does Applebaum too, that homelessness is a symptom not just of poverty, but of great wealth. And of course, it's true. Housing is so expensive in our country because a lot of people have enough money to bid up the price of housing so that so many can't afford it, right? I mean, the demand for housing is driven not just by lots of people who want homes, but also by a few people who own several homes and who pay prices well beyond what anyone can afford for their homes. So Applebaum says, hey, if Seattle, King County, wanted to eliminate its homelessness, it would cost a significant amount of their budget, 5%. I think 5% is worth it to make sure no one in your city is homeless, but he's saying that's a lot. But he's saying for the government, for the federal government, because homelessness is much higher and wealthier, is often higher, not always, is generally higher in wealthier jurisdictions. So a place like King County, Manhattan, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, very wealthy enclaves, also have high percentages of homeless. So for those places, they actually would have to spend more. And also because housing is more expensive there. But for the country as a whole, Applebaum calculates the entire population could be housed for a year for $10 billion. That's less than the cost of one aircraft carrier. Harvard, by the way, has a $50 billion endowment alone. $50 billion for Harvard, for one institution. And people say, oh, we could tax the rich and we still wouldn't be able to address our problems. The hell we couldn't. The hell we couldn't. Just $10 billion. No more homeless. Why don't we do it? Well, I guess because the billionaire class doesn't want to make sure that poor, struggling, working people never have to worry about being homeless. I mean, that's the only reason. So, why don't we? And I mean, what does it mean? What does it say about us as a country that we don't? And I thought this was really interesting, what Applebaum gets some more quotes. So he, with the $10 billion, which is clearly something we can easily afford, federal government could render homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. And even just shifting the billions in annual federal subsidies we give to rich homeowners, we could eliminate homelessness. And why don't we? Well, rather than say why, I mean, it's obvious why, because those billionaire homeowners have a lot more influence and power than the homeless people do. But the reason that we don't, and Lonnie Farah says, there's cruelty. It's cruel. Of course it is. Of course it's cruel. We're a cruel country. People are cruel. We're cruel people. We turn up our nose at those who are suffering. We don't take action that we could take. And, I know Jeff's response is always going to be, well, why don't you give away your money? And my answer is A, because I would suffer. B, I'm not perfect. And C, it wouldn't solve the problem. But if we all together chip in a little through government, we take care of the problem. So my question is, why aren't you, who oppose slightly higher taxes on the billionaire class to eliminate this cruelty, why don't you? What's your reasoning? What's your rationale? Just about done for today and for the week. Jeff didn't just ask about the cause of homelessness. He also asked about what it would cost to eliminate hunger. I don't have a number, like a $10 billion round figure like we got from Applebaum, but I was immediately thought of this, and I found this article. Immediately, you always look for stuff you find. So from US PIRG, earlier last year, it really wouldn't cost us anything. We throw away more food than we need, than those who don't have enough need. It's not a question of producing more food, paying for more food. It's just being more efficient with it, less wasteful, distributing it more fairly, more justly. So these are the solutions. These are obvious solutions. The people that we elect aren't pursuing them. They're not on your side. They're not on the side of the poor, struggling, and working people. And that's the case whether you vote for Republicans or Democrats. We have to find, we can find, we need to find, we will find a better way. At least I sure hope we will, or I'll, at some point I'll be dead. But until then, I'm going to keep calling for this. All right, have a great weekend. Hopefully my cough, my throat, whatever you want to call it, my issues here with my congestion will be largely a thing of the past on Monday. See you then. Oh, and yeah, don't forget, like, subscribe, please.